Council meeting. It is 6:07 p.m. And for council members tonight, we have myself, Jennifer Cervenka, I'm the chair, Vice Chair Raymond Koya.
Raymond Koya is here.
Thank you. Patricia Reynolds,
Patricia Reynolds, present.
Ron Gagnon,
Ron Gagnon here.
Don Gomez,
Gomez present.
and Joy Montanaro.
Joy Montanaro, present.
Thank you. For CRMC staff, we have Executive Director Jeff Willis,
Here, Madam Chair.
Deputy Director Jim Boyd,
Here, Madam Chair.
Chief Legal Counsel Tony DeSisto,
Here, Madam Chair.
and for the record, at some point this evening, Mr. DeSisto is going to leave us, and Attorney Longo is going to join us. And you'll let us know, Mr. DeSisto, when that happens.
Yes.
We have as our Aquaculture Coordinator, Ben Getz.
Present, Madam Chair.
Okay. Lisa Turner, our Recording Secretary.
Present, Madam Chair.
Ryan Moore, our Moderator.
Present, Madam Chair.
Laura Dwyer, our Public Outreach Coordinator.
Here, Madam Chair.
And thank you. And finally, Cindy Tagney, our Court Reporter.
Present.
Thank you.
Madam
Mr.
Chair, I
Moore?
want to go where Cynthia is.
Who?
I said, I want to go where Cindy is. Look at her background.
Oh, I know. I was looking at that.
Reminds you of a couple weeks ago, right?
Yes, absolutely. I miss it. Although there have been shark sightings since leaving, so I'm glad I'm back safely on the East Coast. All right, so turning to Mr. Moore, would you please run us through the rules for this Zoom meeting and in particular how those who are watching can participate?
Absolutely. It's the Rhode Island Coastal Resources Management Council virtual semi-monthly meeting, 5/11/2021, conducted in accordance with Executive Order 21-30, 133rd Supplemental Emergency Declaration, extension of executive orders. If you're having problems with your computer audio, use the call-in numbers for this meeting. The numbers will be posted in the Zoom chat box once this presentation is concluded. A note to meeting participants and attendees, please be advised, this is an online meeting including all audio, video, names and comments visible in the chat box are being recorded. All members of the public who wish to comment during these proceedings must correctly identify themselves before proceeding. Council members, applicants, and CRMC staff, please turn video on. Do not use phone and computer audio at the same time. Raise your hand or use the raise hand function to be recognized by the chair. Identify yourself by first and last name. Members of the public, please keep your video off. Mute your microphones when not speaking. Use the raise hand function to be recognized by the chair. Wait to be recognized and unmuted by the moderator to speak. Identify yourself by first and last name. For those on the phone, please press *9 to use the raise hand function. When recognized, identify yourself by first and last name.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Okay, proceeding first on our agenda to approval of the meeting minutes for April 29, 2021. Those were circulated earlier and also available on the website.
Madam Chair, Ray Koya moves approval.
Thank you, Mr. Koya. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Gagnon. I'll do a roll call. Vice Chair Ray Koya.
Ray Koya votes aye.
Patricia Reynolds.
Reynolds votes aye.
Ron Gagnon.
Ron Gagnon, aye.
Don Gomez.
Gomez, aye.
Joy Montanaro.
Joy Montanaro, aye.
And myself, Jennifer Cervenka, abstaining because I was absent at that meeting. So the meeting minutes of April 29th, 2021 have been approved. Next on our agenda are subcommittee reports. Mr. Boyd, do you have any of those?
Yes, Madam Chair, one subcommittee report. A workshop for the RASO subcommittee has been scheduled for Friday, May the 28th, starting at 10 a.m. and scheduled till noon if necessary. And the purpose of this workshop is for the subcommittee to review its recommendation to the full council.
And that's essentially reviewing a draft decision prepared by Mr. DeSisto, is that right?
That would be correct, yes.
Okay, great. All right, any questions about that? Okay, if none, thank you, Mr. Boyd. We'll move on to Mr. Willis and his report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have just a couple of items to report to the council tonight. First, and you'll remember back in 2019, the council had a federal consistency decision issued for the Vineyard Wind Offshore Renewable Energy Project. This is the one that's in between Martha's Vineyard and Nantucket. The record of decision on that matter was issued today by the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, Bowen, affectionately known as. And from this point forward, the federal agencies have 90 days to issue the outstanding federal permits for that project so that the project in itself can go to fiscal close. So it's entirely probable that by the end of the summer, early fall, this project will be ready to construct. Along the renewable energy front, we are continuing our negotiations on the South Fork project, which is an Oyster renewable energy project between the Fishermen's Advisory Board, which is an advisory board to the CRMC staff, and the developer Oyster. We are continuing our negotiations on that, but as you also know, at the next council meeting, staff will be making its presentation to you all on its recommendation for the project relative to our federal consistency review. And then lastly, which you have read about in the press and I alerted you to also, the Block Island Wind Farm, the cable that goes from the farm to Block Island, and then the cable that leaves the island and goes to the mainland. As you know, the council had ordered both Ørsted, who owns the cable going to the island, and National Grid, who owns the cable going from the island to the mainland. Both those cables, after they were installed, daylighted. And as not required by the council and the staff when we permitted that project. So the order to have those cables reburied was issued by the council last year with a May 31st deadline to have both cables reburied. I've been reporting to the council on the progress of that work over the past winter and spring. And up until very recently, the progress has been positive. Ørsted has reburied its cable by installing with horizontal directional drilling technique a conduit that started offshore and daylighted underneath Crescent Beach to a manhole, if you will, on the other side of the beach, and laid the cable and are laying the cable in that conduit now, and they're wrapping up their part of the project by removing the old cable that has been discontinued. Right following on the heels of that work was the National Grid effort, who also laid a conduit with HDD method. And in the course of the time frame that it laid that conduit and then started to install the cable, ran into some issues with obstructions inside that conduit. The National Grid team and its contractor tried several different methods to clear that obstruction, but could not in a timely fashion to make sure that they could make the May 31st deadline to reinstall the cable, and have asked just today for an extension to our order to not meet the May 31st deadline. As you know, in the press release, they unilaterally made a decision to stop the work and not continue the project until the fall after the summer season. And that was work with the town of North New Shoreham to get that agreement. But as of working with the agencies, in particular CRMC, and making sure it was consistent with the order, the work will not be done by May 31st. So we have just received an extension request today to have that deadline be extended. As you know, and I just mentioned, we have the next meeting of the council dedicated to the South Fork wind matter. And the only time that we can deal with the extension for National Grid to meet, to rebury the cable after May 31st would be in June. But it's my opinion that because the extension request was received in a timely fashion as possible and today, prior to the May 31st deadline, that the extension request would be valid, that we can handle that in June. So I'll be working with the council on, and National Grid, on getting them in front of the council to ask for that extension and having it be deliberated in front of you all in June.
Mr. Willis, how much work had they got done, and do they have to start from scratch again, or they have the conduit and it's just a matter of clearing the obstruction, or no one knows yet?
So they've tried several ways to clear the obstruction, and they were hopeful that in the methods that they tried to do so over the past couple of weeks, that they could clear the obstruction so that they can lay the cable. They were not successful, and they made a decision that what they were doing needed further assessment to figure out exactly what is the obstruction. Is it a partially collapsed conduit? Was there damage to the conduit when they were laying it through the HDD process? They don't have the answers to those questions, which we have all asked. And that's part of the assessment that they need to continue, and then come up with a plan of how they will meet getting that cable reburied. I suspect one of the ways, or one of the solutions, will be to re-drill, horizontal directional drilling, another conduit. But that's part of the assessment that they're going through right now to figure out all the different pathways to get them to make this project successful.
Okay, thank you. Any additional questions for Mr. Willis?
One question,
Mr. McGagnon?
Jeff, regarding the Vineyard wind approval, do we know if the agreements we had reached with them through the federal consistency and the funding they were going to provide for the fishing industry is still in effect, or will we expect to see that?
Yep, and Jim, I see Jim's hand raised. He can go into detail, but yes, Mr. Gagnon, the federal consistency decision had there was an agreement between the developer and the fishermen's group to have a financial package, compensation package, as part of an agreement between those two parties. It wasn't a requirement of the consistency determination, but it was an agreement between those two parties. And that agreement will become effective upon financial close of the Vineyard Wind project, which will occur after all the other federal permits are in order. And Madam Chair, if Mr. Boyd can go into more detail, he can probably answer Mr. Gagnon's question a little better.
Well,
Sure. Thank you.
just very briefly, Bowen's decision today, the record of decision, requires Vineyard Wind to implement the mitigation packages negotiated between Vineyard Wind and the state of Rhode Island, as well as the state of Massachusetts. So yes, those agreements are binding, and they are requirements of Bowen's approval in the Vineyard Wind 1 project.
Okay, that's good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any additional questions? Okay, if none, then I'm gonna take our matters out of order, and I'm gonna start with the public hearing on proposed rulemaking, because I think that's gonna go fairly quickly. So I'll start with that. That's relating to management procedures 650-RICR-10-00-1. And Mr. Boyd, I believe you're going to speak to this.
Yes, Madam Chair, thank you very much. The proposed amendments for the management procedures, as you noted, Madam Chair, under the Rhode Island Code of Regulations 650-RICR-10-00-1, were publicly noticed on April the 26th. We're presently in the 30-day notice period, which will end on May the 26th. So this evening, we're providing an opportunity for the public, if they choose to comment on the proposed amendments. Very simply, the amendments are to delete the required $1,000 filing fee for petitions of declaratory ruling, as well as petition for rule change. And the only other change we're making is to subsection 1.5.9A, and that is to increase the time period from 5 to 7 days that an applicant would need to submit materials so that they can be considered by the council at its next council meeting. Earlier today, 2 sets of written comments were forwarded from the CRMC administrative staff to council members. I will, they're very brief. I will just read them into the record for this evening, and then we can open up for public comment if anyone chooses to comment. The first letter we received was April the 28th from Save the Bay. Kendra Beaver, on behalf of Save the Bay, indicated that Save the Bay, on behalf of its members and supporters, supports the proposed amendments to sections 1.4.6A and 1.4.9 of the Coastal Resources Management Procedures to remove the filing fees of $1,000 for declaratory rulings and petitions for regulatory change. The proposed amendments uphold our constitutional rights to petition the government, comports with the Administrative Procedures Act, and the practice of other administrative agencies in Rhode Island. We appreciate your willingness to listen to our concerns about the fee and respond in a timely manner. The second filing is from the American Civil Liberties Union, filed by Mr. Stephen Brown, Executive Director of the ACLU. And this is actually his testimony to the council. The ACLU of Rhode Island appreciates the opportunity to comment on the proposed amendments to 650 RICR-10-00-1 concerning the CRMC's managed procedures, and specifically the amendments proposal to eliminate the $1,000 filing fee that currently exists for an individual or entity to propose a change to the council's regulations or seek a declaratory ruling under the Administrative Procedures Act. We write to express our support for these amendments. Our organization was surprised, to put it mildly, to learn that the filing fee existed. The ACLU has been involved in the rulemaking activities of numerous state agencies over the years, and we have never come across any department of state government obliging petitioners to pay a fee for making use of the APA process. Indeed, there is clearly no authority in the APA for an agency to enforce such a fee. We additionally believe that significant constitutional issues are implicated in imposing a fee on a person seeking to exercise their First Amendment right to petition the government for redress of grievances under the APA. We therefore strongly support these proposed amendments to the agency's rules so as to eliminate this problematic financial charge. Thank you for considering our views. As I indicated, Madam Chair and council members, the public comment period is still open until May the 26th. We may see some other comments submitted. However, at the close of the comment period, staff will put all the comments together. We'll write up a brief staff report and have that prepared in consideration at a later council meeting where the council will consider adoption at that time of the proposed amendments. So with that, Madam Chair, I'd be happy to answer any questions and we can open it up for public comment if there is any.
Okay, yeah, I think, through the reading of those comments from Save the Bay and ACLU, we understand the issues with the 1.46 and 1.49. As to 1.5.9A, increasing from 5 to 7 days of submission of materials, that is just to help out staff and the council a little bit better in preparing for proceedings where there's witnesses and exhibits. That 5 days, particularly if you have a weekend, can be problematic in trying to get prepared for a meeting. Is that the motivation for that?
That is the motivation, Madam Chair,
Okay.
yes.
Okay, great. So I strongly support that. All right, any questions from council members about these three proposed amendments before I open up the public hearing for any additional comments? Okay, if none, then I will open the public hearing on this. And if anyone would like to comment, you just need to raise your hand and you'll be admitted into the meeting. Okay, I don't see any hands. So I'll just ask one more time. Anyone want to comment on the proposed amendments? Please indicate by raising your virtual hand. All right. So if there's none, then I'm going to close the public hearing. And at this point, we don't vote on anything. We're going to allow for the remainder of the public comment period to transpire and see if we get additional comments, and then it'll come back to the council after that process is concluded and you digest those. Correct, Mr. Boyd?
That's correct.
That is correct, Madam Chair, yes.
Okay, great. All right, anything further on this? Okay. All right. So moving on to our first application, which has been out to notice and is before the full council for decision. That's 2020-04-037, John Bowen and Patrick Bowen for establishment of a 0.95 acre oyster farm in Sacconet River. Mr. Getz, are you going to provide the staff report?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
So yes, as you mentioned, the applicants here are brothers, John and Patrick Bowen. They envision starting a small family-operated oyster farm using submerged gear in the town of Tiverton, southwest of Sacconet Bridge in the Sacconet Cove. This is closest to the DEM recreational fishing area, access area in this area, in the town of Tiverton. It's gone through a couple revisions as recently as today even. I received a new revision based on some late comments that were received after the notice of this meeting being posted. So I'll try to bring you up to speed as quickly as I can here. I know there might be a little discussion with some of the folks I've been talking to in the last few days. But to start off, this started during the PD as in a location that was rather shallow. You can see that on page 9 of the council packet. It's attachment D. The PD meeting, the concerns that were raised really had to do with how shallow the site was. There was a little bit of concern from CRMC that it might be too shallow to accommodate the gear and have the gear remain submerged at all, during most tides. Also was a concern regarding the recreational shellfishing layer that appears on the DEM marine fisheries map. As the council may remember, that this is a layer that was developed through like the shellfish initiative, shellfish management plan with URI. So it's based on public input. It's not vetted information. The applicants were fairly certain that there were not a lot of quahogs there. We did a survey and found no quahogs there, and clearly this wasn't a conflict with the recreational shellfishing. However, because that was a concern that was raised by DEM, the applicants moved the site to deeper water and moved it outside of the recreational shellfishing area. That was the proposal that was noticed on April 7th of 2020. And you can see that on attachment B, page 7 of the packet there. The biggest difference you can see is that the shape as proposed went further to the west and encroached kind of towards the mouth of the outflow of what is known as Sacconet Creek there. We actually received 5 letters of support. One of those letters of support was from an objector at the PD meeting who commended the applicants for adjusting their plans to accommodate the perceived recreational shellfishing conflict. However, we received 2 objections just outside the 30 days, but one was just 2 days after the closing. The other one was about a month later, or a month or 2 later in July. And both those comments had to do with recreational shore fishing. So it appeared that the applicants had an attempt to find deeper water and avoid conflict with the recreational shellfishing layer, had pushed themselves towards another conflicting user group. And that would be the shore fishermen. And from my own observations of this area, I've seen people fishing on the shore of the DEM parking lot access area at Sacconet Marsh. It's an area that sees light to regular recreational use depending on the season. And there are people generally recreating, but also fishing. So the concern was that people would be walking out on the sandbar that is attached to that beach there and casting out into what would be the proposed farm. So this revision that came about due to these concerns was largely coordinated by Dave Butel. It was before my official start here. So I kind of came into this application just after the public notice. But the second revision moved the lease a little bit further back to the east, again away from the kind of outflow of the creek there in the sandbar. That revision was also put out onto the public notice email list. And it received no comments directly back on that email. However, we did get a request from the Tiverton Harbor Commission. They wanted to weigh in. Again, they actually, I think, requested an extension of the 30 days to schedule a meeting to discuss. The Harbor Commission was at the PD meeting. They were the ones that had a primary concern about the shallow water. And it indicated at the meeting that if it was in deeper water, they wouldn't have a problem. When they reviewed the application as proposed, and they objected to it. And that was by vote, but from what I could tell, it was not quite clear why they were objecting. It seemed they had concerns about water quality in the area, in addition to maybe the presence of moorings that might be nearby. After that, the application moved to the Shellfish Advisory Panel of the Marine Fisheries Council. And during that meeting, there was some confusion with the 2 kind of competing proposals. You know, the first I'll call the original proposal, and then the first revision, which I think I didn't call this in my report, but we're going to call it alternative 1. So there was a bit of confusion about which one they were commenting on. I asked them to comment on both, if they had a preference to indicate such, if they had issues with both, to indicate that as well, or if they believe both were consistent, to vote accordingly. However, the panel decided to object, largely on the grounds that they felt the full Marine Fisheries Council should review this and kind of sort things out. Is my connection okay? I just got a message it's unstable.
Okay.
We can hear you
Can
consistently.
everyone hear me okay?
Just freeze up. Like your picture freezes.
I think
but-
I might try turning off my camera if
That's fine.
yeah, okay.
I think you're fine. It
Thank
just
you.
gets a little tinny, but we can still hear the words.
Yeah, that's good. This happens sometimes when I try to do this from home. I apologize. So yes, the SAP panel basically punted it to the Marine Fisheries Council. The applicants availed themselves of the right to have the Marine Fisheries Council review the application. At that meeting, there were 3 motions made, 2 to approve it or to determine that it was consistent with the pursuit of the marine fisheries. That being the alternative 1. And 1 to remand it actually back to the SAP for further review. There was some concern that they had really no knowledge or input of this area from their members. But the meeting ended with actually all motions failing, and they just gave up, and there was no opinion rendered. And this is just kind of as a footnote that at a subsequent meeting, I found the SAP's own policy document, which governs their review of aquaculture applications. It dates back to 2009, but I dug that up and brought it back out to refamiliarize myself and the panel members with the procedures there. And sure enough, part of those procedures is that the SAP and the MMC should consider revisions or modifications that come about due to objections in the review period. So I hope to avoid further confusion with future applications with the panel and the council. So after that, in the fall of 2020, I actually talked with the applicants a bit about the 2 proposals. I'd come to believe that the alternative 1 was a better layout than the original, largely because it seemed to remove the farm further from that northern shore there of the DEM access area where fishing would likely be occurring. And in support of that, I asked the applicants to actually resubmit an entire application package that had the new coordinates, the new lease shape, a gear layout that was consistent with the new lease shape, so that we could propose, so that the applicants could propose this alternative to the council here for consideration. And if they found it was appropriate to approve, there wouldn't be any confusion in the record of what that site should look like. And based with that, yes.
Just a question, just for clarification of the record. When you're talking about alternative 1, which attachment are you referring to in the staff report?
That's attachment C, page 8.
Thanks.
And I have some other diagrams too that I'm going to show later, hopefully clarify things.
Okay.
Because there are there's 3 different shapes that we're going to talk about here. So with that revised application package, I asked the Harbor Commission if they'd be willing to take a look at this application again and have the applicants appear before them at a meeting, which they were not at the previous meeting. And they agreed. And we took a look at the new application, the new lease shape. I should note there was another issue with the original application where the applicants proposed accessing the site from the DEM management area in the park, using the parking lot and the shore to cross basically the channel to service and build out the lease. That was something that was changed in the revision as well. DEM does not support that, and I think the commission also had an issue with it. CRMC likewise finds it probably would not be appropriate. So the applicants have also modified the application to make clear that they will service and construct the lease using private shore access or a vessel. So looking at I explained to the Harbor Commission that there were no issues of water quality, and DEM Office of Water Resources has signed off on this as part of the regular review process and is indeed in waters approved for shellfish. So that was a non-issue in my mind, and just wanted to make sure the commission understood that. However, from looking at satellite photos, various photos throughout the years, I was able to determine there were probably 2 moorings in the vicinity of this lease. One of them is quite far away and to the west. One was to the south and was very close to the original proposed southern boundary. So the alternative one, it kind of moves the southern boundary a little north and well clear of this mooring. I was able to demonstrate this to the Harbor Commission to their satisfaction that there would not be an impact to moorings here. And they voted to remove their objection and recommend it move forward. So that was helpful, a helpful meeting for sure. And then this application kind of continued to wait for an opportunity for public hearing. When we did have the chance to get this on an agenda and we posted the notification, I received an email from one Kenny Mendez, who had written an objection letter back over the summer in late May 19th. When I had read his letter originally, I understood it that it was primarily concerned with fishing, as was the other objection we had received, and shore fishing in particular, and casting potentially into the lease. Based on my conversations with Dave Butel about that alternative one, it seemed that it was that the revision had addressed that. However, I had a long, lengthy conversation with Mr. Mendez. He also provided me with a PowerPoint presentation he had put together, which we reviewed together. And he kind of educated me on how certain segment of anglers utilize this area, particularly for striped bass fishing, and particularly, I guess, at night, according to him, and that they are aggressive waders in the sense that they wade out to rather deep water and cast very far in towards the outflow of the channel. Now do I have the ability to share screen? I can show you one of the slides he provided me. It might kind of show the council, illustrate for the council the concern.
Yeah, Mr. Moore, can you authorize Mr. Getz to share a screen?
Ben, you are all set.
All right, great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so I think you can see that there. You can see under the outline of the lease here, as proposed, the original, and these are 250-foot casting ranges representing, I guess, a spin caster, someone wading out off this sandbar quite far and casting in all these directions. And you can see it overlaps the lease some. He also provided another slide here, which is something, this is a quote from a book, I think, about fishing, shore fishing for stripers, saying, if you look for these ripples, it's going to be a red hot destination. As you can see, the ripples are about here. If I flip back here, you can see the ripples are here. So it seems like this would be kind of the area you'd want to target. These casting lines seem to be a bit further than that. but he represented, he fishes throughout this area. Stop that share. So,
just have a question
Yeah.
for you. In this, forgive me, for my fishing ignorance. I'm just trying to understand the conflict. So, if you're casting into the lease area, but you have submerged cages, does your cast get caught in the submerged cages, or is it something different that we're talking about? What's the
well, I think that was part of his concern. He was also a fly fisherman. Fly fishing is you can't cast quite as far, and it's more of a surface type action. A lot of spin casters will use surface lures as well. They ride just under the surface or break the surface. It's possible you could have tackle tangled in a cage. It might be also possible to cast in between the rows of the cages. I think there was also a concern that the presence of the cage themselves might prevent someone from wading in there or posing a danger. These were all points he made to me in our conversation.
If I just might add, if you're casting with a fish finder using chunks or even live bait, that will tangle. There's no question that will tangle, but I have never seen anybody doing that, and I've only probably spent over 70 years in that area.
Yeah.
There's an awful lot of fly fishing as the estuary comes in and out. They fish on both sides of the bridge, and a lot of it today is fly fishing. You'll see surface casting with poppers and different types of lures, which shouldn't be a problem. And the only thing that would be affected is if somebody's out maybe at midnight and does go out quite a ways and is using chunks. But I've never seen that in that area. And it's similar to the Almy Creek Oyster Farm, Pete Melanson, in that estuary comes out, that whole marsh empties there, and it's a great spot for stripers, and he gets very big stripers in his oysters. And you can walk out there and cast into the area there also, but nobody ever has a problem there. I've done that myself and without hanging up, and you just don't use a chunk on the bottom with a fish finder rig. Other than that, so I just wanted to maybe add that point. Yeah, it's a very, it would not happen very often, that type of fishing in that type of an area. The fly fishing, the surface casting and spoons and things like that would be the prevalent way, I think.
Madam Chair, I beg your pardon, and I don't like to do this in the middle of presentations, but I've got a procedural question. And that has to do with section 20-10-5 in Fish and Wildlife, subsection B. No application shall be approved by the CRMC or a permit granted prior to the consideration of recommendations by both the director and the MFC. I see that there's no recommendation from the RIMFC, and I'm curious as to exactly what happened there. Is it that they need more information? Is it that they just couldn't go either way on this? So that is the recommendation is that they just can't go yes or no on this for a recommendation. I'm unsure of that, but I'm a little concerned about that language in 2010-5.
Yeah, so Mr. Getz, you had spoken to this a little bit, and I guess that it would be clarified in the future, but for purposes of this application, we don't have a recommendation from that body. Is that right?
I have a letter from Bob Ballou, the chair of the MFC, which outlines the results of that meeting. That is attachment. Yeah, well, it's from 11/16. That would be in the.
It's Ben, it's on page P18 of the council's agenda package.
Thank you.
What page?
B18 is attachment G1.
Yes.
And what happened there?
Well, they made a series of motions. There was a lot of discussion. In my own opinion, I'm going to turn my video off again. I think I'm stalling. They made it to, the first motion was to, approve alternative 1. Yeah, that failed after some discussion. The second motion was to send it back to the SAP for further review. That motion failed. There was a second motion to, again, approve the first revision, and that motion failed. And after that, the meeting was, they moved on. It was a frustrating experience, to say the least. I did get the letter from Bob Ballou, as we regularly do from Marine Fishery Councils after they review an application. Even though I guess it resulted, conveyed no recommendation, I thought that the record was complete with his letter.
So it looks like he's saying because of the process of how it got there.
It was a procedural problem, I think.
What?
I think it really was a procedural issue that the council had with not knowing how to treat the two revisions.
So does that need to be corrected in order for us to act? If it's a condition precedent to our acting?
Well, that's my concern. I see what happened here, and I'm not. I hate to be overly literal, but I think you probably want to focus on that last paragraph from the MFC. And the question to me is, if it gets back in front of them, will he actually be able to make a recommendation? That's the question.
The motions from that meeting are attached as well, which is page 15, or page 16 is when that.
And Mr. Getz, I know your staff report recommends approval of that alternative 1. Is that what you're going to recommend tonight, or something?
I stand by that recommendation as written. However, the most recent alternative 2, which I received just basically earlier today, but have shared with the objectors as well. I would say that configuration equally I would recommend for approval, and it does seem to remove some of the conflict that Mr. Mendez conveyed to me. I believe there are at least 2 other anglers at the meeting tonight with Kenny Mendez who are willing to testify.
And the alternative 2 is it in the staff report, or?
It was not, because I received it after the completion of the report.
Okay.
I can share with you a picture of it if that's appropriate at this time.
And this was so this is not, it was not considered by the, obviously because it developed today, but it was not considered by the MFC, the alternative 2.
No, it was not. I would, well, yeah.
I guess my question, hold on one second, just back to Mr. DeSisto. we're about to get into an area where there's another alternative that'll be presented, and it may be an improved alternative that answers some further concerns of the fishermen. But it's not in the package for the council members, and it's not available. It has not been made available publicly, and it wasn't considered by the MFC. That I'm thinking that we likely wouldn't be able to make a decision tonight if we're looking at alternative 2, and maybe not even alternative 1 if there was some procedural issues raised by MFC. But I'd like your input on that.
These are procedural issues, and I'm just concerned about it. I do think that with this alternative being considered now, which just came in today, and the issue with the MFC, perhaps the best course of action here is to continue the matter, have the MFC take a look at this alternate 2, and also give council members a chance to digest it and have it incorporated into the staff report.
If it's appropriate, I concur with that. It bothers me not having a visual and having time to really think about it. And I think that as Madam Chair has outlined is the appropriate way, and your conclusion of continuing it, for me, seems to be something we really need to do. May not be the time to say that, but it's certainly looking like that and heading in that direction.
Thank you, Mr. Gomez. My next question is does it have to be, I hate to ask the question, but does it have to be renoticed? Is it a material change that has to be put out for public comment?
Madam Chair, if I may.
Yes.
Given the MFC issue, and given that Ben has worked with the applicant and the objectors to it, I think to make it clean, we always need the MFC recommendation. To make it clean, we should take this new information that Ben worked out with the 2 parties to the MFC, get their recommendation, then bring it back, and hopefully at that point we'll have no objections.
Yeah, because it sounds like, Mr. Getz, you were responding to things that came in after public comment period. And, you've spent a lot of time trying to come up with an appropriate configuration that I think, all stakeholders would want to support. And we don't want it marred by, just a process that is confusing somewhat, it appears. Yes.
Yes, Madam Chair, agreed. And we have, on a fairly consistent basis, have modified applications up here, depending on what the issues may or may not be. But in this case, we don't have the Marine Fishery Council recommendation, and I think we need to make this application clean because of it.
Okay, so a motion on this would be Mr. DeSisto to continue to allow for the development of this alternative 2 and representation to the Fisheries Council, the MFC.
Correct.
Mr. Willis, Mr. Getz, is there more to that motion?
And I don't believe so, Madam Chair.
Okay. Okay. Would someone like to support that motion?
Don Gomez, I will support the motion as stated by
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Thank you. I'll take that as a second. And then I'll do a roll call of our group. Okay, Vice Chair Ray Koya.
Ray Koya votes aye.
Patricia Reynolds.
Patricia Reynolds, aye.
Ron Gagnon.
Ron Gagnon, aye.
John Gomez.
Don Gomez, aye.
Joy Montanaro.
Joy Montanaro, aye.
And myself, Jennifer Cervenka, aye. So the motion to continue to a date we don't know yet to develop the alternative to and represent that to the Rhode Island Marine Fisheries Council. I know the applicants here and some objectors may be here. Thank you for coming tonight and continuing to work to get an appropriate configuration. We appreciate everyone's efforts, particularly Mr. Getz also. All right. Anything further on this before we move to our second application?
I just want to note that the good news here is that the application is not denied. It's just taking a little longer to move to get a final vote for it and keeping it clean, especially in that area. It's a much used area, easily accessible for people, and it's just people there all the time. So I think keeping it clean is very good, but the application is still in process, and it sounds like staff thinks that we may have a good, a good path forward. So I just want to encourage the Bowens to stick with it.
Good. Thank you for that, Mr. Gomez. All right, I see that Mr. Longo has joined us. Does this mean we're losing you, Mr. DeSisto?
We are, but Mr. Longo is in the attendee portion with his hand raised.
Oh, okay.
How does he get onto the main panel?
I think I've been admitted.
He's here.
Look at the smile.
Yeah, there's a smile.
Yes.
Okay. On that note, everybody have a good night.
Mr. DeSisto.
Good night.
Good night now.
Okay. Okay. So we're to our second application, which has been put out to public notice and is before us for full decision. It's 2019-12-079 Seakiss Aquaculture LLC proposal for a 4.25 acre expansion to an existing aquaculture site and modification of gear type. Mr. Getz.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
So this is an application in Dutch Island Harbor off the west side of Jamestown. The applicants, known as Seakiss, is a partnership between Bill Cregan and Nick Papa. They are both experienced aquaculturists. Nick Papa in particular has been in the business for a long time. And the Seakiss site, I would note, is probably one of the best maintained and organized floating gear sites we have in the state, really. What they propose to do here is enlarge their 3.86 acre site to 8.5 acres. And that's a expansion of about 4.72 acres. Now you can see the site on attachment A and B, page 6 and 7, the packet there. Page 7 in particular shows you the areas they're expanding towards. So they're expanding offshore and to the north west. So this is, they currently employ floating gear at this site, and that's of the low profile variety. You can see an example of this page from their previous application, page 8 of the packet, attachment C. This is similar to the high profile gear in design, but its size is smaller. You can see it only accommodates 2 bags, and it has 3 floats on the back that are about 4.5 inches thick. They are also approved for a different type of gear at this site, which is the type of gear that they're proposing to use throughout the site with this expansion. That gear I call ultra low profile, really for lack of a better name, but it's commonly known as a flip farm, one word, flip farm. and that's a New Zealand based company that has secured a distribution in the United States recently. And this type of gear is already been approved by this council in one other location. You may remember the Silks Modification, which is just to the north of this site. He was going to use high profile floating cages, but had offered the alternative of the ultra low profile flip farm, which the council approved at that hearing last year. So this is a similar type of gear. There's some sketches of it on page 9, attachment D, and page 10, as well as what the layout would look like, attachment F on page 11. As you can see, it's just regular rows with the center lane through it.
Mr. Getz, is this kind of state of the art, the lowest profile that's on the market for cages?
I would say it's the lowest profile gear that offers the ability to also dry.
Okay.
Yeah, because you can have a single bag with floats on it. There are other sites that have that, such as the Tory site in Portsmouth. Also in Point Judith, there is Jonathan Island Oyster. They use a very similar system. And yeah, that is quite low profile, but it isn't terribly robust. This is a little more of an open area, and can see some prevailing winds from the south, southwest in particular. This gear design, the flip farm, was actually designed for rougher water application. So it has that benefit as well. The real benefit of the gear, beyond its low profile and durability, is efficiency for the farmer. So these larger profile cages, or even these lower ones like they use now, you have to reach over the boat and pull them, physically flip them over. And when these cages are heavy, laden with market size oysters, it can be quite heavy. It can be quite strenuous work. So the flip farm offers you may remember from the previous presentation on the Silks farm, a double helix type apparatus, kind of like a sidecar that runs on the side of the boat. And that can catch the line of cages. The cages themselves are almost side by each with a line through the top, so they can pivot along that. And as it goes around it twists the line over. So you can use essentially the power of your vessel at a low speed, not a lot. And that will just flip your cages over, and it's as easy as mowing the lawn with a tractor. Just go up and down the lines. So this is quite a bit of labor saving. It has the added benefit of being lower profile, and is, as I mentioned, designed for durability. Each tubular basket has a single black float, which is about 2 3/4 inches thick, so not very thick. And so, you wouldn't see much of that float at all, really resting on still water. There would be a little bit. You would see, obviously, more of the cage when it's in the drying position. But even still, these cages, I think, will still be lower profile, even in the drying position, than the currently utilized low profile gear. So this applicant, unlike the Silks application, applied for this expansion with the use of this gear throughout the lease. As I mentioned, he was already approved for this gear. He just hadn't converted it over. The real issues with this lease that occurred during the PD and later in its review was the number of individual units proposed. This gear is unique in that each unit is really only equivalent to, say, one bag. that one oyster bag in capacity. So for instance, the Walrus and Carpenter site, which you may remember the most recent application back in February, I believe, applied for 2,000 of the high profile floating cages. And those each take about 6 bags. So it would take 6 of these individual flip farm units to equal the equivalent capacity, growing capacity of one high profile cage. And I did include a comparison picture of the high profile and the flip farm system. It kind of gives you an idea of what the system looks like. It's on page 11, attachment H. So it's roughly a similar footprint, as you can see. It's not that much longer than the actual high profile cage, but it's clearly a lot lower. And then also page 14 has another shot, a different angle. But the number of cages proposed here is 12,000 cages, and that is roughly equivalent in capacity to the new Walrus and Carpenter site, which uses 2,000 of the high profile cages. So other than that, this application received its regular review with no issues, no issue from the Marine Fisheries Council. For anyone else, they've also have received their Army Corps permit as well. And the objections during the 30-day review period, I think we had about maybe 10 of them, were mostly from the neighborhood of Westwind Drive. A lot of the objection letters came in on something of a form letter making the same points about all the pending applications of the time in Dutch Island Harbor. And that would be the Walrus and Carpenter site, the new one, and the Silks modification, and this expansion. So a lot of the objections were the same. A lot of the residents, because they worked out the deal with the Walrus and Carpenter site, noted that, but a lot of the concerns were similar in that, this will be a visual impact, and some concerns about birds, and that this will make the harbor no longer pristine, that we hadn't considered recreational uses, and that there was no overall plan for aquaculture in Dutch Island Harbor. Addressing the objections, in my opinion, yes, the cages are visible, but I think this particular design of cage will be less visible, and the applicant has minimized the visual impact in this way while still being able to utilize the proven growing method of floating gear that also affords the opportunity for air drying.
Mr. Getz, the category B requirement on this, or special requirements for agriculture, they only require that there be minimization of visual impacts, not that there won't be a visual impact. Is that right?
Correct. That is my understanding, Madam Chair.
Okay. Thank you. Continue. Sorry.
This site is quite far from the homes. I've actually gone to that shoreline on some of my walks inspecting these leases, and it is much further away than that original Walrus and Carpenter site. They are not moving any closer to that neighborhood with this expansion, and the activities that we understand that go on in Dutch Island Harbor we've had quite an experience there, CRMC, with the over the last years with these applications, and the recreational use in this particular part of the shoreline is not very heavy. The town itself, did not object to this application, but I would note that the town did send a letter, kind of similar to the letter that the West Wind Drive neighborhood sent, and that was kind of asking CRMC what the plan was, that they had a concern, what development, what would be the limit to aquaculture here. Now, I certainly recognize that an area can become saturated with aquaculture. There are forces, I'd say, at play that have kind of restricted the aquaculture to this segment of the shoreline. But I've also, been working with the town of Jamestown, and I've met with the residents on a couple occasions now to talk about our future special area management plan, which will have an aquaculture siting component, and have encouraged them to participate. I know we have a number of folks on our stakeholder working group now from Jamestown, including the town planner and the manager of the harbor office. So, CRMC looks forward to working with the town and the stakeholders there as we develop the special area management plan. Given that this expansion is using the type of gear that is the lowest profile and is efficient for the operation, I believe it's met all the other requirements of the CRMP, and I would recommend this for approval.
Just to go back to your note about the other uses, whether or not there's user conflicts, did you say that it's not a heavily used area for recreation, the proposed expansion area?
Yes, that's correct. From looking at the, doing the, from what I know, talking with the folks at the harbor office, from my talks with a lot of other stakeholders in the area, I don't think this farm will displace a lot of recreation.
Question for you on the 12,000 ultra low profile flip farm cages. It's 12,000 for the entire expanded footprint, or it's 12,000 on top of what they already have? I was confused on that point.
Yeah, so it's 12,000 total. That is the gear plan submitted and approved by Army Corps, that would be for the total 8 or so acres there.
So they're going to take out the old low profile cages on their existing lease and replace with these ultra low, and then add in new ultra low.
Yes, I'm not exactly sure what that order will be. The applicant is here and could probably answer that better than I could, but it is my understanding that the end result will be 8.5 acres roughly, all done in a uniform fashion with the flip farm gear in neat rows throughout the lease.
Okay, and is it so of the 12,000 cages? Would it be about, I don't know, 40% would be in the existing lease? 40% of those? I'm just looking for rough.
Yeah. So page 7, attachment D, you can see the existing farm there in the hash mark.
Yep.
It's the 3.8 acres. And then the expansion is that L shape around it.
Okay.
So yeah, it's roughly 40% or so, I guess. Yeah.
Other questions for Mr. Getz? Okay, if none, then I would ask the applicant if it would like to speak on its application and be available for questions of the council. If you raise your hand, we can admit you. Hello, Mr. Papa.
Hello. Thank you for having us on the agenda.
Yes. Well, you heard the staff report. Is there anything that you want to reiterate, expand upon, clarify?
No, I think Ben covered it very well. I guess the
Excuse me,
highlight.
Madam Chair, would you like me to swear this witness? Is he the applicant?
Thank you, Mr. Longo.
Okay.
Yes.
Sir, could you raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm the testimony you'll give tonight will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do, sir.
Thank you. You can put your hand down and proceed.
So I believe that Ben covered the application and all the highlights very well. And to reiterate some of the most important parts, where we spent a lot of time searching for a low profile gear because we knew that was one of the main concerns in the area. Also, from our standpoint, efficiency and workability long term, it was very important. And this is honestly quite an innovative gear type that we're excited to employ. And I think it could, lessen the impact visually at the same time as make our business more viable and sustainable moving forward.
And did I hear earlier that it's already in use someplace else in Rhode Island? Or will this be the first application?
I believe that this will be the first installation. It's approved just north of us. I know possibly elsewhere. I'm not up to speed on that, but over in Westport, Massachusetts, there is a guy that has it in use. And right now, because the supply chain's kind of slow going, the gear availability is an issue. So I believe they're expecting containers of this gear to arrive in the beginning of June. And I don't know if that's the holdup with the other farm that's approved, or if they just haven't had the need to employ it yet.
So if you were to get approved, what would be your installation schedule? Do you start with your existing farm, convert it, and then you move over to the expansion area?
No, I think we would do the opposite, just from a workflow and product delivery standpoint. We would keep the existing gear, which is in relatively good shape. We just actually had to put a lot of work and money into it to fix it and get it ready for a couple more seasons. So we would begin on the new ground, installing the new gear, and then work toward the old gear and eliminate it as we made it. It's a substantial investment as well, so we would like to do it incrementally. And that's our plan as of now.
Okay. And you wouldn't be opposed to a stipulation that would require you to install it for the full acreage over a period of time?
No, I wouldn't be opposed to that. Obviously, I don't want to hold ground that's not being utilized. That's something we've put on the top of our priority list. In our other farm, East Beach Oyster Company down in Integrit Pond, we've been really open and welcomed inspections to show that we are utilizing 100% of our lease. Because I know that, as a public asset, it's important not to take ground and that's not being used.
Sure. Okay, anything else you want to point out to the council on the application?
I think we've covered all the bases. I just, we're very thankful for the opportunity to farm in Rhode Island waters, and that's, it's something that we take seriously. You know, the neatness, partnered up with Bill Cregan, who did a fantastic job setting up the farm. It's unbelievably neat and organized. So I think that about sums it up.
And how have you had interactions with the objectors? Have you dealt with them directly, or has it really been just through CRMC?
I have not. No, I've been dealing with Ben strictly.
Any other questions from council members for Mr. Papa? Okay, so I think Mr. Papa will probably switch over to others who want to comment on the application, and then we may come back to you.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. So I'd ask if there are others who are attendees, if they'd like to speak on this application, either for or against, and now's your opportunity. And I see Sharon Purdy. Miss Purdy, we can't see. Okay, you're unmuted. We just can't see you.
Oh, is there something I should? Oh, you want to see me?
Well, you don't. You can do whatever you want. But just thought I'd bring to your attention.
Okay, I'll start again because you probably couldn't hear me. I'm one of the West Wind Drive residents who's been very involved in watching this proliferation of lots of oyster cages. And I do share the observation that this farm is very well organized compared to some of the other ones. My concern is, as Ben has probably done very well to explain, is that it's just, you know, one application after another, and then each of them now is wanting to expand to larger areas. And if I look at this particular expansion, it's to be twice as much as what is there now. And I think based on a chart that I got from Ben, there's 29.5 acres currently, and this will add, you know, another 4.72. So it's a significant addition to the whole, you know, area that's already there. And I think Ben is saying it's not fair to compare cages to cages, but currently they're about 10,635 cages, and this adds another 12,000, just this, you know, just this one area.
When you say 10,000, what are you referring to? All the cages in the area or this lease?
No, all the cages in the area.
Okay.
And you know, just that it seems like it's a great farm, but it's just, again, adding so much area of farming to our harbor, that and it is moving out into the bay more. So, I mean, into the harbor more. So it's not so much affecting the shoreline, but it's just, you know, the boats that are around there and the kayaks that like to stay near shore. Now they'll have to go farther out. And dinghies that want to, you know, dinghy over to shore. It's a longer distance. So those are the concerns that I have, in addition to the concern that we've had all along, that, you know, here we are, what's next? You know, it's just lease after lease after lease, which is approved, and it just makes the area bigger and bigger and bigger, and we never know when it's going to end. And I know that there's been some work on the SAMP, but, you know, it just doesn't get done. And, you know, we're hoping that this is the end of it with this last set, but, you know, what we never seem to get any confirmation that we're done. It's always, okay, what's next?
Yeah, we have made it a priority to start collecting more information and putting together working groups on, aquaculture siting in the Bay as a result of people like you coming on in recent months saying this is important to us. And we recognize that it does merit a full planning process, which we're at the beginning of. I will have Mr. Willis talk about it a little bit, but we have made it a recent priority. It does take some time to go through the process and to talk to all the stakeholders. As I understand it, there is a group that's already established for Jamestown that Mr. Getz spoke a little bit about. And I encourage you and people like you to come forward to, keep pressing us to do that, because it's personally very important to me, because I would rather do it on a more global basis with goals and areas than ad hoc. We do the same work. It's just you see the whole picture when you do the bigger planning process. So I certainly understand your concerns, and we're trying to catch up with that. Mr. Willis, do you want to add anything?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Ms. Purdy, because the chair has expressed exactly what we want. We want as much input from as many people, from as many sectors as possible. So what we have done starting last month was officially kick off the planning effort for what we call the aquaculture element of the Bay Special Area Management Plan. And we have met with several of stakeholders, identifying user groups, uses of the Bay, and having individual stakeholder meetings that help formulate what a global agenda may look like, in anticipation of holding later this month, early June actually, of our first public, what we call a working group on aquaculture that will help shape what this aquaculture element of the plan will look like. So please, and it's quite large. This working group consists of well over 20, and Ben, correct me if I'm wrong, maybe well over 30 individuals that represent various issue areas and stakeholder positions in the Bay. And like Ben had mentioned, we already have representation from the town sitting on that working group, as well as having previously met with them a couple of times over the past month plus. So while the chair is correct, we have started the process, but it's been fairly intensive, the process that we've started, to get a very good handle on what a scoping exercise should include, so that we can move forward on this. That'll be our summer task. Our summer task will be to help develop and shape what an aquaculture element for the Bay sample will look like.
But in the meantime, as more and more of these leases are approved, aren't you sort of limiting yourself, because you've already said that such and such is okay? You're probably not going to, take that away from people. So would it make sense to not approve any more expansions or leases until the SAMP is written and approved?
It's difficult to stop the flow of applications coming in for a planning exercise of that nature. And so we have applicants for various parts of the Bay and the pond still that we are reviewing, and I understand your concern. But one of the things that we will be looking at is an exclusionary planning process, where we're looking to areas that we say, this is a good area, this is not a good area for aquaculture for whatever reason. And one of the reasons may be because there already is enough aquaculture there. So all those types of planning exercises that maybe people are more familiar with on a land side, we'll be also looking at on the water side too. So not only exclusionary planning, we'll be looking at process questions, we'll be looking at gear issues, just like we're talking about tonight. but in a global bay-wide perspective.
And Mr. Willis, what is the June meeting that you're talking about that Ms. Purdy could attend? I'm sure it's not scheduled yet, but is that the first official working group public meeting?
We have, and I knew you'd put me on the spot, and that's okay. Madam.
I take it.
I'm looking through my calendar right now, but it is
Okay.
in early June to be that first large-scale working group meeting.
And that'll be posted on our website.
Absolutely, yes.
Oh, okay. So at this point, I guess you don't have a way of saying what we would like to hear, which is that Dutch Harbor will be one of those exclusionary areas.
Dutch Harbor will certainly be looked at in the planning process, given its current capacity, future capacity, current uses, existing uses, natural resources in there, the physical resources, all those things will be considered.
And future capacity is something to be determined, or
Yeah.
you already know what that is?
No, I think to have a comprehensive planning process, you'd have to look at all those issues objectively.
I would say that, the average review time for an application, is 9 months to a year often. And beyond a small half-acre expansion that's pending, I have no other applications in Dutch Island Harbor. And if I did receive one, I certainly would make the applicant aware that we are doing a planning exercise there. And that might have some bearing on the outcome of his application.
And do you have any goal for when the sample will actually be finished and approved?
Madam Chair, if I may.
Please, Mr. Willis.
It'll be an iterative process. It'll be a typical planning process that we expect to occur throughout the summer into the fall. It's envisioned to be fairly a year-long process, but again, given the working group issues that come up and the types of research and planning exercises that we have to perform, given those issues that may present themselves during the process that we haven't foreseen yet, it may take longer. But I think a fair and honest answer would be upwards of a year for sure.
Yeah.
And this application we're considering tonight, this came in 2019, is that right? So it is consistent, Mr. Getz, with what you said as far as these applications have a long lead time.
Oh, yes, certainly. They certainly do.
So new ones that would be coming in, if they would come in this area, would be caught up in that planning process and be running parallel with it.
Yeah, and I would also add that, I as I mentioned, I've been talking with Jamestown quite a bit. They were the first town we reached out to in our scoping process. We really wanted to make sure we reached out to them first, as this is kind of a, I guess you call it the ground zero for where the SAMP kind of began. And I've also talked with the town administrator at length about the process that the town chooses to use for the preliminary determination meeting. Now, the preliminary determination meeting is a CRMC administrative meeting. It's not necessarily a public hearing of any sort, but the town is notified of it, and the town provides the forum for the meeting. So previously, the town of Jamestown would provide the forum for the meeting with the town administrator, the town planner, and then we would have our invited cooperating agencies present as well, DEM, Army Corps if necessary, or others. What I recommended to the town was that they don't do that the same way, that they actually provide the forum for the PD at the Harbor Management Commission meeting. I think this provides a different level of review early on, particularly now that, should I say, the areas that have appeared to be least conflicted are kind of now taken up. And if you were to expand aquaculture here more, you certainly would want to have a close eye on it from the Harbor Commission and those on it who are, of course, knowledgeable of the waters and its uses. So the town had agreed to do that. So if I do get a future application, it will be publicly notified through our own standard CRMC procedure. But the meeting would also be notified on the agenda of the Harbor Commission and would be there under the minutes of the meeting, and would, therefore would also be, that information would be available to any interested parties. So it was a procedural suggestion that I think would serve the town better. And that's how I'm going to proceed now with the town of Jamestown for any future application.
Is there anything more you'd like to add, Miss Purdy?
No, those are just my concerns.
Yeah, thank you for voicing them. Okay, I think we'll move on now. We have two more hands. There's a Jamestown Zoom host.
Yes, Madam Chair and members of the council. My name is Jamie Hainsworth. I'm the town administrator in Jamestown, and we've talked before at your meetings. And I won't repeat what Sharon Purdy said, but she covered most points. But one point I do want to expand upon, if I could, to the council is the idea of a moratorium. And I would urge you to institute that moratorium right away and not wait for the stamp, not wait for the global picture to be formed, because as she's already suggested, it's a little late to shut the door after the cat's already left the barn. So with that, I would urge this board to institute a moratorium beginning tonight, if you could. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Administrator. We have talked about a moratorium. It is a drastic action, and it's certainly, we couldn't do anything with that tonight. It hasn't been noticed for public comment. It hasn't been vetted. I understand your concerns. It makes sense to me. I also think that, as Mr. Getz pointed out, as applications are going to be coming in now, they're going to be running alongside of our SAMP planning process, which might have the same effect. But we'll certainly, I remember your comments that you made previously. I know this is an important point for the town of Jamestown, and we're aware of it, and we're working as quickly as possible.
Thank you.
Anything more, Mr. Willis or Mr. Getz, you want to add to what the town administrator just?
No, Madam Chair.
Right. Okay, next is Kenny Mendez.
I believe Mr. Mendez was here for the previous application.
Okay. I can't hear you. We can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
We can. Are you here for the this application, which is the CKIST?
I'm actually listening as a public participant.
Okay.
And would comment and add to what I've heard here. I think it's
sure.
I have a home in Tiverton, and I was here for the first hearing, but in hearing the great work that you're all doing, Madam Chair, and your concern about the proliferation of oyster farms and the parallel track you'd like to set, I am just wondering whether it's possible, if you approve farms in the future, not a moratorium, but just possibly a position where you could say, should your findings in this parallel track come out to be that this area is concentrated and is over concentrated, that ones that you're approving now don't get grandfathered, and that if you're approving them now, it's subject to a review over time. So at least the applicant knows when it's approved that they might have to retract it if this parallel track and all the stakeholder input happens to say this area is overcrowded. So I just provide that comment here as an interested resident who has one coming in here as well, and I will definitely engage in this going forward. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Just to address that point, and I might let Mr. Longo comment on this. I don't believe legally we could take away anything that we would provide to current applicants, and particularly tonight, based on subsequent planning. So I just, Mr. Longo, if you want to comment on that, I don't think that's a possibility.
Yeah, once we give a permit, the applicant gets certain vested rights. The regs do say if the circumstances in the area change, the water quality or something changes, we can review it for something like that, an environmental reason. But that's a pretty high hurdle they'd have to get over. We'd have to get over.
So the point is, it's just, it would apply to future or the parallel track applications, not this application, or ones that have already been approved in this area, unless.
Yeah, correct. Because the applicant, the regulations that apply are the ones that are in force when the applicant submits his application. That's what we can hold them to, and then we grant them the permit. And it's very difficult to roll back a permit. And we certainly couldn't subject this applicant to anything like that tonight.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Longo. Is there anything else, Mr. Mendez, you'd like to add?
No, thank you. I just thought I'd offer that, given hearing the discussion is possibly a compromise.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, I see another hand with the name of Alan.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can hear you. We can't see you,
Okay.
but we can hear you.
Okay. My name's Alan Katz. I live next to Sharon Purdy on Westwind. And I just want to reiterate what she had said, brought up a lot of good points. And one of the main things is that 3 or 4 years ago, there were no oyster cages, or maybe 100 or so oyster cages in Dutch Harbor. And with the approval of this application, there's going to be 22,000. So I just, once again, the big picture is that in a very short amount of time, the amount of cages that are in Dutch Harbor has just skyrocketed. And it's unfortunate that the SAMP wasn't done sooner. So the big picture could have been looked at instead of each one individually.
Yeah, and you heard the testimony about the number of cages or the ultra low profile compared to the high profile, that it's like a 6 to 1. I think I got that right, a 6 to 1. So you're gaining lower profile, but you have more cages. So that I just, add that it's the equivalent of 6 ultra low profile, or the equivalent of 1 high profile. Do I have that right, Mr. Getz?
Yes, that is correct. And I would also note that, for instance, for comparison, the Wallace and Carpenter new site was recently approved for 2,000 high profile cages. which the residents of West Wind Drive, due to their agreement with the applicant, did not object to. This is for a similar capacity but in a much lower profile. And I would mention roughly within the same acreage as well. So roughly the same footprint. But it is a 6-to-1 ratio because the high profile cage holds 6 bags, and these ultra low profile systems, essentially a single bag and a single float capacity. It's more like a tubular basket though, instead of a bag.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Katz, anything further you'd like to add?
No, that's basically what I wanted to say. But even with the smaller profile and the lower profile cages, it's still from just about 0 to, even if it was say 2,000, that's still 12,000 cages in Dutch Harbor, where 3 years ago there were none. That's pretty much what I want to have to say. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Understood. All right, is there anyone else who would like to speak on this topic? Raise your hand if you would like to. Okay, I don't see anyone else. Mr. Papa, I'll come back to you to see if you want to address any of the comments before we close the public hearing.
Yes, I have a few of those points that I appreciate all the feedback for, first of all, but as far as Sharon Purdy had some concerns, and I just wanted to address that. The first one was that we were going to be moving closer to shore, making it more difficult for recreational kayakers, but we're actually not moving any closer to shore. Walrus and Carpenter actually moved closer to shore with his late innings change of his coordinates. So if there's any obstruction, it's going to be to the north of us at the Walrus and Carpenter lease. And the baskets, you keep calling them cages, which I guess technically they could be considered cages, but they're pretty small baskets. So the ratio of 6-to-1, it's actually less visually obstructive. Each 6 baskets is much less surface area and visual obstruction than one larger of the larger oyster grill cages. Legitimate concerns, and I appreciate you bringing them up for sure. And then I guess those were the main two, and then the baskets being small, it also, from our standpoint, it's the number of oysters that we can grow is what we're looking at when we ask for the 12,000, and to be sustainable and to be able to be successful enough to keep employees and keep the operation moving, we thought that was the appropriate number.
Thank you. Any other further questions for Mr. Papa before we close the public hearing? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Papa. I'm going to close the public hearing. I will first ask if we want to have any further discussion on issues. And seeing no hands, then I would ask for a motion.
I was going to ask one question, if that's okay.
Oh, go ahead, Mr. Gagnon.
So, I understand a moratorium is difficult, but I guess my question would be, if a new application came in for Dutch Harbor within the next month or so, would we be able to at least wait until the SAMP is completed to make a decision on it, or would they be running at parallel tracks such that we could at least use the results of the SAMP to make a decision on any new applications?
That's a good question. Mr. Willis?
I can answer that, Madam Chair. Technically, Mr. Gagnon, like Mr. Longo has mentioned, if an application comes in, we look at it under the regulations at the time of its application. Given the uses that occur in the area, if an application came in right now, we would have to balance what was being asked for relative to what's already there and the other uses that are competing for that same area. So I suspect as you see this area have more aquaculture farms in it and a new one comes that seeks to site itself in that area, it's competing for an area that may have found the other uses have established themselves there ahead of time. So those are the types of questions that we're going to look at for any application that comes along, in addition to what we're going to look at bay-wide. What other uses exist? What are the competing uses for the same area? And does aquaculture make sense given those other competing uses? On top of the typical questions we ask, can the natural resources support it? So yes, it would be on a parallel track, but again, what are the competing uses that are already there are going to be a significant question that would have to be asked.
And it sounds like because of the working group process, you're going to have the agency will have a lot more of that information on balance and competing uses when that application comes in. If that's going to start next month, different than before, there's going to be 30 people working on it and providing input.
That's, if I may, Madam Chair, that's an excellent point, because whenever we have new information, we use that information in our reviews. So a working group will be helpful in having us better understand the various areas of the bay.
Thank you. Is that it, Mr. Gagnon?
Yes, thank you.
Great, thank you for that question. So I'll just go back and ask if there is a motion that someone would like to put on the table on this application. Anybody?
Madam Chair, I'll make the motion that the application be approved with the conditions and stipulations prepared by staff.
Okay, Mr. Gomez?
Had to unmute, second. I'll second that motion.
Thank you. Any discussion? As far as the stipulations go, we talked earlier about the full conversion of, there's the existing and the expanded, and the representation is that it will all turn over to this ultra low profile, and then there'll be 12,000 of them, right? So is one of the stipulations that full conversion be required? And I'm just asking, I don't know that.
I think you brought that up during our discussions, and Mr. Papa agreed to that, but I'm not sure what the best time frame is for that.
Right, Mr. Getz?
Well, what I would say that, the application that we receive includes an operational plan and site plans, gear layouts as required. That's all been approved also by the Army Corps of Engineers in a very detailed letter that goes through the exact number of lines, units, anchors, and the like. So the details of the operation are tied to the application as proposed. If we approve the application and the operation plan, we are essentially holding the applicant to carrying through with those plans in that operation. But I would not be adverse to a stipulation that you would have to, convert over the existing farm to this system within a reasonable time frame.
And what is that reasonable time frame? Is it just to say reasonable time frame, or is it a number Years.
I think that the wild card there is the availability of the gear and the disruption of the supply chain that the world has experienced in the last year. So I think it would be hard to say I wouldn't want to hold him to something that might end up, being unduly delayed through no fault of his own.
Might I suggest we require the applicant to use all reasonable efforts to do the full conversion, and then if if it's not done in a while and we go back to him, he could justify why it hasn't been, and if it's tied to shipping or something, that would be excusable. But if it wasn't, you could revoke his permit for not complying with that stipulation.
Yes, and I've also been in contact with the other applicant who was approved for this gear. They're likewise, I think, trying to, acquire the gear. So I'll be somewhat aware of when this gear will be available to this part of the United States. And I have no problem following up with the applicants and the stipulation that Mr. Longo suggested.
Okay, so Mr. Gagnon, it's your motion. Is that acceptable to you?
Yeah, I will amend the motion to incorporate Mr. Longo's suggestion on the timing.
And Mr. Gomez, do you still second that?
I will.
Okay. Any further discussion? Okay, I'm going to do a roll call on the pending motion. Vice Chair Ray Koya,
Ray Koya votes aye.
Don Gomez,
Don Gomez votes aye.
Ron Gagnon,
Ron Gagnon, aye.
Joy Montanaro,
Joy Montanaro votes aye.
Patricia Reynolds,
Patricia Reynolds votes aye.
and myself, Jennifer Cervenka, votes aye. The motion to approve with the stated stipulations carries. Thank you, Mr. Papa, and good luck with your project. Okay, that brings us to the end of our agenda. So I will move to adjourn. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Madam
Good
Chair.
night.
Good night, all.
Good night.
Night.